Thanks again for joining us today. You're at the MMF's first virtual symposium. We're excited to have everybody today, our panelists, our guests, our many partners and stakeholders in ECE. So please be sure to take the poll and get yourself settled. We plan to be talking from about 1 o'clock today till 2:25, 2:30. We hope you'll be joining us for the 2 subsequent symposiums we have later in the month. So just a quick reminder, we plan to record this today. So just want to make sure everybody's aware of that. And yes, you're welcome to sign into the chat, say hello, tell us who's here. We'd love to hear from you. We'll be capturing the chat as well as recording today's proceedings. Thanks, folks. Those of you who are joining us, be sure to check in and sign in the chat. We'll be getting started formally in a minute, but please sign in the chat. And I want to remind you that we're recording today's session so that we have it for our future reference. We will have 2 subsequent symposiums later this month, and we hope you'll be joining us for that as well. We have an exciting lineup today as well as at the future symposiums. Hey, Sasha, thanks for joining us today. Deborah, thank you. Stu, it's great to have you. Debbie Brown, Child Care Counts, glad you're here with us today. Carla Silvestri, one of my colleagues from Montgomery College and a Board of Ed member, is here. Thank you, Carla. Kathy Stevens, our other one of our other co-chairs of MMF Leadership Group, is here with us today, and she leads McHale. And so we're glad to have her on our leadership group and participating today. Sally Katz, Amy Turner, Larry Bram, Sarah Watson, who's helping us work through our entity deliberations, Amy Kropp, Bill Weichman from. So here we have the answer to the poll. We have a number of business leaders, government leaders, nonprofit, education, health, philanthropy, ECE, and social service folks with us today. So on that note, I think I'll kick us off and get us started. So welcome again, everyone, to MMF's first virtual symposium. I don't think any of us expected to be here, but thank goodness for technology and thank goodness for access to technology. My name is Susan Madden, Susan Cottle Madden. I'm with Montgomery College. I work with Dr. Pollard. I'm a jack of all trades there and master of nothing. But I'm most honored to be one of the 3 co-chairs of the MMF Leadership Group. I serve along with Kathy Stevens of McHale and Kevin Beverly as co-chairs of the Leadership Group of MMF. The Leadership Group is made up of a wide swath of individuals as reflective of our efforts as MMF to be a collective impact entity, to bring a cross-sector of community leaders together to deliberate on some of the most pressing challenges facing our community. That means just like our group here today, We have education, we have business leaders, we have philanthropy, we have nonprofits. And I would be remiss if I didn't say a big shout out to Nonprofit Montgomery, who is our backbone agency and really help make MMF really work. They're the secret sauce. But of course, again, we have a wide variety of folks on our leadership group that hopefully reflect the diversity of our community, as well as the array of stakeholders that care about the future of our community. The last several years, we've spent a lot of time and energy deeply focused on our children from birth to 5. And why is that? Because we know that helping our children succeed in that very important window from the day they're born to the day they enter kindergarten is the time when their futures are created. And that's important because we need to know that for our economic health, that the children of today will be tomorrow's homegrown talent to make Montgomery County work. We also know that high quality, affordable childcare and early learning is important to today's workforce. Employers need to know that they can count on their employees to be at work when they need them being productive. And we want to help families be able to get to work, be productive, and return home to their families and be great parents, right? So in thinking about the economic imperative, the social imperative of ECE, early care and education, we took this on as a priority to deliberate, think about, and how we might advance ECE in our community. We've been a long time devoted, caring community and have lots of great resource for ECE, but we know from our studies that there's more to do and more to bringing the cross-sector, employers, nonprofits, philanthropy, education together to work together to get out of our silos and build a better system to help advance our children's lives, which will in turn advance our community's lives and advance our economy, and of course, move Montgomery County forward. So today we're here to have the conversation about early education, early care and education in the time of COVID. If we've learned nothing over the last 6-7 months, we've learned more deeply, and it's become more transparent how important ECE is to the running and humming of our community and keeping employers moving forward and keeping families moving forward. And so we thought it was time to talk about ECE in the time of COVID and what investment is necessary to support the workforce of today and develop the workforce of tomorrow. And that's the subject of today's conversation. We have a symposium landing page. I hope you will look at it. I hope you will comment there and here in the chat if you have ideas and comments that you think are worth sharing with us. And I think I've covered all the housekeeping I need to talk about. We've got a great lineup of speakers today. And I'm going to hand it over to Bill Tompkins for a little more introduction. He's going to be my co-facilitator today. Bill's a member of the leadership group and serves as the Executive Vice President and Chief Operating Officer of Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. So Bill, let me hand the mic to you, so to speak.
Okay, good afternoon, everybody. Economics is my background, and working for an economic development agency, I can only tell you that early care and education is an economic imperative. It's really critical to our success going forward. And when you look at the workforce for today and for tomorrow, a cross-sector collaboration is critically important. With COVID-19, there are a couple of things I want to point out that reality underscores the necessity for focus on not just social issues, but emotional issues, the mental health of our children, ages 0 to 5, and for a cross-sector collaborative approach to ensure that our youngest learners are equipped to survive the challenges of today in order to be successful and resilient tomorrow. Let me also say that it's really important for everybody here to stay healthy too. Very difficult times. If we don't take care of ourselves, we won't be able to take care of the kids. So that's an important reminder for all of us as we go through that. Now I'd like to acknowledge our incredible group of sponsors that are making all of this happen. We've got the Montgomery County Department of Health and Human Services, Asbury, Perconti, Comcast, Kaiser Permanente, the Early Care and Education Funders Collaborative, Bob and Linda Jungentab, the Greater Washington Community Foundation, Montgomery County Public Schools, the Community Action Partnership, the universities at Shady Grove, Dave Andriadis from UBS, and of course, the Montgomery County Economic Development Corporation. So thanks for all of your support, both today and going forward. And now I think we're going to see a video.
Susan, can you come off mute, please?
Thank you. So first, thanks, Bill. We're going to kick off our day with a quick video from our #1 partner, if you will, of our many decision makers and elected officials who are deeply committed to the work of advancing ECE in our community. Long before MMF took up this issue, there's been a long-standing efforts by our elected officials to advance the affordability, the quality, and access to ECE. So we have a video here. Well, you're heard from the county executive, county council members, particularly Mrs. Navarro, a longtime champion of ECE, from Board of Ed members, members of our state delegation, who will share with us their thinking on ECE. So let's go to the videotape.
High-quality, accessible, and affordable early care and education programs is an equity issue and the single most important investment we can make in our community. It positions children to succeed academically and socially, which translates into a prepared workforce ready for our global marketplace. This is the socioeconomic imperative of our time, one that is crucially important to children of color who are the majority in our county.
I'm happy to join you in MMF's virtual forum. Even in this pandemic, we continue to make investments in families, businesses, and in early childhood education providers. As an elementary school teacher, I saw the importance of early education opportunities, and ECE is our most powerful tool for preparing children to start school on a level playing field and ready to learn. Our job now is to create the seats, create more ECE professionals, and find the resources to ensure that all children have access to early childhood education.
The president of the Montgomery County Council and the council member for the 3rd District. Child care providers have always been a most important part of our families' lives in Montgomery County and a most significant part of our economy. We know that child care providers experience significant revenue loss when schools and non-essential businesses close and residents sheltered at home to slow the spread of the COVID-19 virus, and faced increased expenses related to strictly established health standards as Montgomery County strives to safely reopen. We know child care providers are running out of funds to maintain their businesses, while at the same time, their sustainability is critical to our overall economic recovery. And that is why all of my colleagues on the Montgomery County Council recently unanimously approved 2 special appropriations totaling more than $17 million in support of child care providers and families in need of care. I was proud to spearhead the allocation of $7,687,000 to support school-age child care providers operating licensed child care programs in public school buildings and aid families and accessing full-day care during virtual learning. We know our work is not done. Additional support will be necessary to meet the needs of child care providers and ensure equitable access to high-quality care for families. We are committed to working in partnership with Montgomery moving forward to develop effective solutions. Thank you for all that you do for all of us in Montgomery County. Thank you.
Delegate Eric Ludke, Majority Leader in the Maryland House of Delegates. And my priority in terms of early childhood education this session is making sure that we guarantee that the funding that early childhood education needs is still there. We're hitting a really tough period in terms of this recession. Government finances are really challenging right now, but we need to prioritize all of education from birth through college and make sure the funding's there to build the foundation for our economic recovery.
I bring you greetings on behalf of my colleagues on the Board of Education. The board is deeply committed to the expansion of access to full pre-kindergarten programming, and we truly appreciate the work of Montgomery moving forward, making certain that our youngest learners have access to early care and early education. We all know that it makes a difference in the readiness for all of our students as they enter kindergarten, and it's an early investment in our workforce of tomorrow. So thank you for your continued collaboration, and we continue to look forward to your work.
I'd like to thank all of our elected officials for their comments today and their leadership. Montgomery County, as you can see, is very committed to this effort. Money talks louder than words. $17 million just appropriated, not to mention the staff and all of the other commitments that support these efforts. So a round of applause for a great county that we're involved with as a partner. We've got a first set of speakers coming up, which I'm going to introduce. You got to start with a system somewhere to build out the building blocks that make things happen. And I'm going to start with welcoming Charlene Mohammed. She's the head of Head Start program. She's the Head Start program manager for the Community Action Agency. And our out-of-town guest speaker, Dr. Ronald Ferguson, who's the founder of The Basics. And you'll see his bio and then more information about his the nonprofit Basics. There's a one-pager and then there's information on the landing page. I encourage you to go look and find out more about what he's been doing up there in Boston. Now I'm going to turn it over to Charlene and Dr. Ferguson.
Welcome, everyone. It's good to see so many of us here today and to hear from Dr. Ron Ferguson, who has been a champion of early childhood education and comes from a unique perspective, from a business perspective. Dr. Ferguson has a short presentation that he's going to share his screen with. Please feel free to begin writing your questions in the Q&A portion of down below. If you'll notice, you'll see Q&A there. You can log your questions there. If we don't get to all of your questions during this segment, Dr. Ferguson will be joining us later on for another panel discussion. And so you'll have a chance to ask your questions or get them mentioned at that time. So Dr. Ferguson, welcome. And why don't you go ahead and share your screen?
All right, can you see my screen?
Yes, sir.
Great. Well, it's a pleasure to be with you today. I'm excited to share the basics, and it feels to me like Montgomery County is an ideal community to really make the most. This is a huge opportunity to put all the pieces together in one community, from birth all the way into early adulthood, as we say, from cradle to career. You'll see the title is Workforce of Today, Workforce of Tomorrow. And I'll be talking about a strategy that starts at birth or even prenatal. But I want to remind you, even as I begin, that as we help parents to be more effective in working with their own children and preparing their own kids for life, we're also helping those same parents to be more effective today in the workplace. We're building their sense of efficacy. We're building their sense that life kind of makes sense and fits together, and their routines are coherent as a lifestyle. I want to begin by just connecting what we're talking about to the economy and talking about why it is so important that we make sure our children are trained, that their minds are trained, that their cognitive skills or cognitive abilities are cultivated these days, because there's been a huge increase in inequity that's very much related to education. The chart on the screen starts at 1980 and shows the wage levels at different education levels, going all the way from young people who have no high school diploma, or actually older people who don't have a high school degree, all the way to advanced degrees. And we see the spread in wages was from basically almost $17 to almost $30 in 1980. By the time we got to 1918, that difference, less than 40 years later, had pretty much doubled, from $12.78 to $23.21. So this just highlights the fact that to be economically successful, to be successful on a number of different dimensions in today's world, the chances of being successful are much enhanced by academic achievement, by years of schooling. And it all starts in early childhood. There's a poem here that I actually use when I do work in schools. It's called Sure as Sunlight. There's a child here in your caring who may someday cure all cancer, but you've got to lay the groundwork so that it can come to pass. She's a child who has not blossomed, so you cannot see her brilliance. But as sure as there's sunlight, she's here, now, in your class. I can't tell you what her name is, nor her height, nor weight, nor color, only that she is, potentially, a history-making lass. So every one of our children, every one of us has latent potential that's waiting to be harvested. Robert Schuller used to say that any fool can count the seeds in an apple, but only God can count the apples in a seed. So we're organizing to harvest as many apples as we can from the seeds, in this case, that constitute our children. And there are no throwaway ages. We're talking today about early childhood. But as communities, and as you are right now organizing as a collective impact collaborative, there's work to do at every age as children grow up. From birth to 3, there's a huge amount of brain development and socialization that we're going to talk about. From 3 to 5, there's that preschool period where kids are learning to work with other children. They're learning their basic facts. They're learning to interact with people more effectively. From 5 to 9, they're learning to read so that later they can read to learn. They're getting basic numeracy skills that are going to be later used in science and other topics. From 9 to 14, they're making the transition into adolescence, identity, who am I, how do I fit in with the world are major issues here. From 14 to 18, they're starting to figure out what their career path might be, what kinds of courses they might need to take in high school to set themselves up for entry into the labor force after high school. From 18 to 22, they're actually making that transition into adulthood, going into additional training opportunities, going to college, getting their first jobs maybe. And then from 22 to 30, they're transitioning into real adulthood. They're getting their feet planted in the world. And any of you who have children in the 22 to 30-year-old age range know that they're not totally on their own at that time. So from birth all the way till they're 30 years old, there's work to do. There is no throwaway period. So we need to be sure that as families, as school systems, as communities, as the business community, as the business people, we need to do everything we can to make to make development as successful as it can be during each period. Now, brain development. I'm an economist by training. I started my career studying state and local economic development. I only shifted over to education when I learned how important standard reading and math skills are to wage rates and economic success. And then about 10 years ago, I noticed in the national data that a lot of the gaps that motivate us to be interested in schools and addressing achievement gaps, those gaps are evident by the time kids are 3 years old. Start looking into it more by the time they're 2 years old, actually. Start looking into it, we find there's a period of huge brain development in early childhood. On the screen here, you see the first bullet is that the brain is 80% of its adult size by the time kids are 3. Actually, it's 70% of its adult size by the time they're 1. Think of all the things that a 1-year-old can do that an infant can't do. And the fact that those abilities are brain-based, they're built into the brain, and the things that a 3-year-old can do that a 1-year-old can't do. There's just a huge amount of development during that period, and the brain is like a sponge. It's just the easiest time in life to learn. And we find that brain architecture, how the brain develops, not just in its size, but in its complexity, is very much affected by the environment in which children are growing up and the interactions that they have with their parents and their families and other caregivers. And our brain is basically a big system of circuits. And the fact is that the circuits they get used more often, thicken and grow stronger. The circuits that don't get used as much get pruned away. They narrow, they just like a bush that's growing. Some of the branches will grow strong, others are not so strong. Sometimes we'll cut those off to prune so that the bush can put the energy into the other branches. And the fact is that the amount of stimulation, the amount of back and forth communication that infants and toddlers experience will affect how much of that brain capacity, that brain potential is retained. And all this lays the foundation for future learning behavior and health. This chart is a picture of a cross-section of neural networks. You'll see newborns, 1 month, 12-year-olds, newborns, 1 month old, 9-month-olds, 2-year-olds, and adults. Notice that the 2-year-old cross-section of brain tissue looks more like the adult cross-section and is in fact more dense than the adult cross-section. But the adult cross-section has these concentrated nodes, meaning that for them, the parts of the brain that get used thicken up, become more powerful. The parts that don't get used wither away. So you see what looks like broken branches in this section of the chart. This image is of a child sitting in a mother's lap looking at a screen. This was from a particular study where they made sure before the study started that the child knew what the objects were that were going to be on the screen. So you see a book and a dog. They put dark glasses on the mother and mufflers so she can't see or hear, but she's holding the child. Then they say the word and they look to see how long it's going to take for the child to look at the object that's been named. And that's measuring language processing speed. One study found, the bar chart here on the graph is from a study that found a 6-month gap in language processing speed by the time children were 2 years old, by 24 months. In other words, how quickly they understand something that's been said to them. Project that forward to kindergarten and just imagine a room full of children where some children are very quickly catching on to what the teacher is saying and others aren't catching on quite so quickly. It takes them longer to think about what she said. Think about that happening repeatedly. So ultimately, some kids just say, I'm not going to understand this. They tune out, they give up. We want to stop that from happening. The fact is that for children who enter kindergarten ready, those who've had the early experiences that they need, who are on track when they hit kindergarten, 82% of those children by one study were on track with reading and math skills by the time they hit 5th grade at 11 years old. If they were not ready for kindergarten, only 45% are ready. That's almost a 2-to-1 ratio. That's fewer than half the children who were not ready for kindergarten were on track by 5th grade. So we need to get it right earlier. We need to get kids on track for kindergarten. So what can we do? Punchline, we're going to argue the basic strategy is an answer to that. We talk about making life the program. No matter how many early childhood programs we have, children are still at home most of the time. They're still with their families and the other people who live in their household, in and around their household. So we need to do everything that's currently on the roster for formal early childhood education. But we also need to make sure that what happens at home is on point. The parents back up and reinforce the skills and life experiences that children need in those early years. So I'm going to play a video here to give you just a kickoff orientation idea to what I'm talking about.
Next time, won't you
Learning begins the moment your child is born.
baby, baby, baby. Do you want to play too?
Every child is filled with vast potential for success in life. And those first 3 years can have the greatest impact on your child's learning.
I'm gonna push this, and then they'll spin. Ooh! Wow! Awesome job!
It's all about giving a child a proper start. That's what being a parent is all about.
Lo estás haciendo, amor, lo haces. I wanted to make sure that I was here every day. Such a joy.
Every parent of every background can make a positive difference in their child's life.
Feel it.
Oh. A few simple everyday activities can make a big difference. That's why The Basics is working with research and community leaders to promote an important new initiative.
2. Good job. 3.
The Basics are 5 simple principles that we want everyone to know. The first of the basics is to maximize love and manage stress. The second is to talk, sing, and point.
Let's take the bus. I'm bubbly, bubbly back.
The third is to count, group, and compare.
1, 2, 3.
The fourth is to encourage and enable movement in space and play. And the fifth is to read, but not just to read. We want to read and discuss stories.
Whoa, what is that? That's what the duck sound like.
These are the 5 fun and simple things that every parent can do beginning from birth. Let's all work together to make sure our children can become the best, most well-prepared they can possibly be.
Maximize love.
And manage stress.
Talk, sing, and point.
Count, group,
Y compare. Explore through me and play.
read, and discuss stories. Please join us and help spread the word. So you see what we're trying to do is affect what happens at home beginning from birth. And let me say just a little bit more about each of these basics principles. There's a principle, then there are a bunch of associated practices. So maximize love, manage stress. Fact is that when infants and toddlers don't feel emotionally secure, they tend not to develop self-control, self-management, self-regulation skills as much or as well as they otherwise do. They tend not to learn to shift their attention from one thing to another quickly, to make a plan and follow through on it, to resist temptation. So we want to shield young children from stress. We want the parent to manage their own stress so that they can be emotionally present for the child. And if we can do that, if we can have people who can manage their own stress and shield their babies from stress, or at least when their babies get really stressed, to help them calm down so that we don't have them in a perpetual high state of awareness and stress that we call toxic stress. If we can do that, we can have children show up for kindergarten more able to manage themselves. So that's the first of the basics. And it's difficult to do in these times because there's so much stress, but we want parents to know it's important to do this so they're more intentional about trying to manage it. The second of the basics principles is talk, sing, and point. Infants can hear 3 months or more before they're born. So they come out of the womb already having started to encode language. When they're born, we want to talk real talk that will build on the language capabilities they've already started to develop by the time that they're born. So it's real talk, even though the way that we speak should be that high, sort of sing-songy voice that we call parentese. Oh, look at how cute your toes are. That kind of talk that babies and puppies tune into more effectively. So, and pointing helps children, infants decipher that these words, these sounds we make have something to do with objects. Every time mommy says bottle, she's pointing at that thing over there. Or every time she says face, she's pointing at this thing up here. They start to catch on. And learning is cumulative, it's scaffolded. So the more quickly young children understand language, the more they will understand the environment and start catching on to all the ideas that are so fundamental to success in life. And singing is just another way of communicating that teaches rhythm, it teaches language. So talk, sing, and point. Count, group, and compare is the next of the basics. Oh, actually, there's a little video I want to show you here that I just want to show you just a few seconds of it. It's from a study that they were focused on 4 to 6 year olds in this particular study, but the same phenomenon matters when kids are younger. It's about back and forth, serve and return interactions and conversations. This particular study was one of several recently that's documented the brain development, actually the physical instantiations of language in the brain.
Related to the brain function. And what we were surprised to find is that the number of adult words didn't seem to matter at all for the brain function. What mattered was the number of conversational turns.
The part of the brain that showed the biggest difference in relation to conversational turns at home is one of the 2 major language areas of the brain. It's called Broca's area. And what we saw was that the more these children had conversational turns at home, the more this area was engaged as they heard stories spoken to them while we were imaging their brains. The second thing we were surprised by a little bit was that it didn't matter the education or income level of the family. What mattered was how often these conversations turned back and forth.
So I just want to emphasize what he just said. He said it didn't matter the income or education level of the family. What mattered was the back and forth conversation. So as social scientists, we often see these correlations with income and education, and we're trying to figure out what are the lived experiences that correlate with those differences in income and education that are producing the brain development and the other child development outcomes we care about. And we're starting to narrow in now on what the activities are, what the lived experiences are that are behind the brain development. And so it's not really how much education you have, although education does affect income and income does affect whether you can buy a lot of stuff for your kids. But as we emphasize to people, to parents when we work with them, it's not really how much you can buy for your kids, it's what you can do with your kids. And a kid is as happy with a box or a spoon as they are with that expensive toy that you bought for them. So it's about the activities. Count, group, and compare is about foundations for numeracy. Just one little point here. What's most fascinating to me is how kids catch on to the fact that numbers correspond to groups of objects. 5 is not just what you say after 4 before 6. 5 is 5 of something. So playing grouping games can help with that. Explore through movement and play is about helping parents understand that playtime is discovery time. And if they get involved with their child and welcome the child's curiosity, they can help to cultivate their child as a learner. And finally, read and discuss stories is about really not even about the reading. An infant and toddler has no clue whether you're really reading or not. Just looking at the pages in a book and telling a story and allowing them, pointing at the pictures, the bright pictures, and speaking with expression and letting the child hold with the book and asking them for their reaction to what they're experiencing can start to lay the foundations for comprehension. And there's also the warm fuzzies when you're sitting there close together, also helps to build relationships and gets us all the way back to maximize love and manage stress. So with parents, we have what we call a 3-pronged behavioral strategy. There are video and print collateral that carry all the ideas about what the practices are and what the reasons are to use those practices associated with the basics principles. There are trusted providers and partner organizations through whom we work. So we're working through the people and with the people that parents already know and trust. So early childhood education centers are important because they connect with the parents whose children they watch. So they can use this material to help enrich what their children are going to experience at home. And these days, when a lot of folks are not face-to-face, we have ways of having online events, online interaction, online parent coaching that can use our materials where early childhood educators can use those with parents who are at home. And then we have twice weekly text messaging that's like a 3-year curriculum. Every message is connected to one of the basics principles. The first message of the week is a fact about the science, and the second message of the week are some try this ideas. So we've got awareness and knowledge, we've got reminders and nudges, and we've got the social reinforcement there as the constellation of the parent's experience, the treatment, so to speak. On our toolkit at thebasics.org, our landing page here at thebasics.org, there's a toolkit for service providers where they can go in and find our videos, download handouts, instructional guides, all kinds of things for working with parents. The toolkit for parents, parents can go straight there and watch videos about each of the 5 principles with a turnstile of ideas and tips for what to do with the child for the age range birth to 12 months and 12 months to 3 years. And so there's a lot of material, direct access for parents that reinforces and complements what's in the text messages. The community toolkit, the one that's referenced here, which says toolkit for service providers, this is what that looks like. There are a few featured resources. And then there is a searchable area in the toolkit to find all kinds of other things. We've got posters and print collateral. This chart on the left here is for medical professionals. There are 12 well baby visits from birth to the age of 3 years. We've got one of these cards for each of those well baby visits from birth to 3 years, where the pediatrician can give this card to the parent after a brief conversation they have while they're examining the baby. Sometimes they're medical teams where there might be another professional who's got a little bit more time to spend with the parent talking about these issues. We've got a project right now with Boston Children's Hospital where they're training about 75 residents to use the basics as their frame for what's called anticipatory guidance. When the pediatrician tells the family what to expect the child is going to do developmentally between this visit and the next visit. There are also tools like this thing right here. Looks like a book, but you open it up, it's got all of our main videos in it. And you push a button, you get a different video. There's a earphone jack, there are volume controls. So it's a really neat device. We've got this is a picture of that here. Text messaging, I mentioned earlier. Strengths-based teaching and sharing and teaching strategies. So we have protocols that help give physicians and other professionals almost a script for how to move through a conversation. Sort of what's the pickup line? How do you start this? And start maybe with, tell me what Johnny's doing that he wasn't doing before. And the parent will start talking about that. And then there's affirmation for that. And then there's a transition into some other things we can think about too now. And by the time they leave, they've got a few ideas for what they're going to do between now and the next session with an expectation that there'll be follow-up. We're going to continue this conversation over time. And then we've got this notion that we call socio-ecological saturation. So the idea is you're working through as many of the local sectors as you can. Now, you can't eat the whole elephant at once. You got to start with a few small bites, and it depends upon how many frontline staffers you have who are helping to push the basics out into the communities. But we've got ways to work with healthcare centers and pediatricians, ways to work with libraries. And just goes all the way around this circle are institutions that parents are accustomed to interacting with, where they tend to trust the folks who are there. And so again, we're saturating the social ecology of the parent. Three-pronged strategy, choose a few, one or more really target neighborhoods, maybe target sector like the healthcare sectors, and then an overarching communication strategy so that everybody kind of knows about it. And then at the end of this, to wrap up here, just to back up and realize that we've got this year, there's a new cohort of children being born. And they're going to go from being infants this year to 5-year-olds in 2025. The question is, what can we do as communities to make sure that this year's infants are kindergarten ready in 2025? We have a challenge that we're offering called 20 in 25 by 2025. Okay, the idea is a 25% increase in kindergarten readiness in 25 different communities across the country by 2025. We're just starting this. We got to nail down all the particulars about what it means, but just to have a concrete target that we mobilize in. We're in like 40 cities now where there are coalitions. Nobody's way down the road, but we've got coalitions in 40 different cities that are working together in what we call the Basics Learning Network to learn together how to make this happen in our communities. And if we, it was earlier before I spoke today, there was talk about getting those preschool arrangements in place with school system and other partner organizations. Well, if we add to that the basics. So the basics is starting at birth. It's operating in these informal at-home settings. You also got the more formal activities that are happening in childcare settings and the school systems pre-K. If we can do that, we can start kindergarten with the big sign, success ahead. Okay. That's the goal. That's what we're trying to achieve. I've got a book here, I don't have time to talk much about it, that's focused on 8 roles that highly successful, highly effective parents play that predicts. We interviewed about 200 people who are Harvard graduates and other folks who are just super impressive. We talked with them about how they were parented, how they were raised, and there were 8 things that popped out over and over again. The parent had really paid attention to playing with their child, learning as an early learning partner. They were a flight engineer when the kids were in school. They were a fixer in making sure that opportunity doors stayed open. They were a revealer in telling kids what life's options were. They were a philosopher in taking kids seriously as a thinker. They were models in the way they carried themselves. They were negotiators in teaching their children to self-advocate and speak truth to power. And they were GPS navigational voice stuck in their kids' head, still giving advice even when their children were away from home and left later. So it's a self-promotion here, but I strongly advocate it. It's a good read, and there's a lot in it that folks who are raising their kids can do. So I think I'm going to end with this poem. And it's a poem from the perspective of the parent of a newborn. With my heart, I will love you and shield you from stress. With my mouth, I will speak what I feel. With soft words and sweet songs, every time I behold you, I'll show you that my love is real. With my fingers, I'll point at the objects I name, and I'll count them in groups to compare. With my feet, I will take you outdoors to explore while we play and enjoy the fresh air. With my eyes, I will read as I show you the world through bright pictures and stories in books. These are ways to make sure that your brain is prepared for successes wherever you look. This my promise I make from the day of your birth, that these basics I'll faithfully do. For my job is to help you grow happy and smart starting now, when your life is brand new. You will learn that your life is an artwork and that you are the artist in charge. But before you decide what to do with your life, listen now to the beat of my heart. So thank you, and really thanks for the opportunity to share this material with you, and I hope that we can partner over the coming years to help make all of our children successful.
Thank you so much, Dr. Ferguson. That was wonderful. We do have a couple of questions. We're sort of short on time, but I think we can get these. I think we have 3 questions. So Farah, did someone raise their hand? And then I think we have a question in the chat as well as a question in the Q&A.
Yes, we have Shanae who raised her hand. Meredith, can you unmute her so they can go ahead and ask the question? Thank you.
Shanae, you should be good to speak.
I'm sorry, that was actually an error. I didn't raise my hand.
Okay, well, let's see. We have a question in the Q&A from Victoria, and then in the chat, Teresa Booker also has a question. Okay, so go ahead, Farah.
Yeah, so we've got a question. If there are resources specifically for single parents when it comes to managing stress, and I'll have you answer that one, Dr. Ferguson, before we post the second.
Right now, everything we have is generic, but the issues that single parents have, they're more intense. They're particular issues that'll be different, but the general ideas, I think, apply to single parents and everybody else too. We are continuing to become more and more specific. For example, we want to develop more material that are directed directly to the children, to parents of children with disabilities of various types. But the Maximize Love, Manage Stress tends to be everybody's go-to focal where they want to start, because we've got to get the stress level down just to have the mental bandwidth to focus on whatever it is we're trying to do. So the answer is not narrowly for single parents, but that is a big issue, and we'll work together with you on it if you've got ideas too. And I should say it's the Basics Learning Network. So these days we've got as many ideas being generated from our organizations around the country as we have coming out of our home organization, the Basics. So it's about all of us working together and contributing to this mountain of ideas that we can all benefit from.
Thank you. And Farah, I can't get verbatim Teresa Booker's question because the chat has gone away.
Sure.
However, can you read it?
Sure. So Teresa asks if the materials online will be accessible, will be disability accessible in the near future, because libraries and school systems aren't able to use them if those materials are not.
I assume she means with captions and so on. We have tried to make all of our materials disability accessible. I think everything on our toolkit is disability accessible. If you find something that isn't, you can let us know. But that is something we're aware of. It's an issue that's come up a number of times before with other communities.
And Farah, can we do this one last question from Tiffany? And then anyone else who has a question, Dr. Ferguson is participating in the panel later on, so you'll have another opportunity. But perhaps we could end with Tiffany's last question in the Q&A.
Yes, so Tiffany Jones asks, how do we get community childcare providers to participate and promote the basics? Great question.
This effort has to be staffed. There need to be folks who go out into the communities, who meet with community child care professionals, who help to prepare them to connect with parents. We are beginning to develop more materials for asynchronous learning, where we could send someone to watch a video to learn better how to interact with parents, and then obviously once in a while convene people in meetings like this to talk and exchange. But frontline folks have to be prepared. When we first started, we kind of thought we could just tell people and they would run with it. We went back, and even though they'd been excited when you first talked to them, they hadn't done anything. And so you need to be staying in touch with folks. You need to prepare them. It does require some infrastructure.
Absolutely. And when you showed that last screen where we saw the sort of the community-wide collaboration, that was quite clear, but it's very exciting, and it sounds very close to the work that we're striving to do here in Montgomery County. So I want to thank you again, Dr. Ferguson, for joining us, and let everyone know. Yes, sir.
One more clarification. Often in most of our communities, and I'm sure in Montgomery County, you've got a lot of organizations where people, this is their life's work. They've been doing early childhood parenting work forever, okay? And they often have this question, well, how does the basics relate to me, okay? And the answer is the basics is lifting up your work. We're not asking you to change your framework. If you've been having a set of words that you've been using, we are asking you to crosswalk the way you've been talking about it with the basics. The basics is general enough that almost any framework we've been using to do early childhood can be crosswalked. But we want parents to be able to go from the early childhood center to the library, to the doctor, to the homeless shelter, to the barbershop, and know that we're talking about the same things and get all that reinforcement be accumulative. And so this is not a substitute for anything. It's a complement to everything that we're trying to integrate.
Yes, thank you. Thank you so much, Dr. Ferguson. And for participants, again, going on to MMF's Symposium landing page, you can find more information about Dr. Ferguson's work and the basics, as there's some other links there as well. So I'm going to turn it back over to Susan.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Charlene and Ron. That was an incredibly informative presentation. And without a doubt, the Basics Learning Network is a collective impact model in order to spread the word and inculcate the basics in everything we do in ECE. So I look forward to learning more about it and your participation in future panels and thinking about how we can bring the basics to Montgomery County. Now, I'm very excited to introduce Ruby Daniels. Ruby is the president of the Maryland State Family Child Care Association, and she's going to get us up and moving right in line with the basics that says encourage movement as part of learning. So Ruby, here's to you and take it away.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yep.
Yeah, sorry, I was trying to unmute. Well, thank you very much for having me. And that was a very nice introduction. So what's in store is like, we're gonna do like breathing exercises, and I'm gonna share an activity that I do with the kids. So I want to bring out the inner child in each and every one of us. The first activity that I'm gonna do is like breathing exercises. And first of all, I'd like to talk the benefits of breathing. We do this all day, every day without thinking, but we ask ourselves, when was the last time we took a deep breath? Probably not much in every day. And this is one of the the easiest and most convenient tool to combat issues like stress and anxiety. It can even reduce pain, high blood pressure, and even aid in digestion. As you know, breathing also releases the carbon monoxide in our body. Actually, breathing is in charge of 70% of cleansing the body toxins. The 30% is through bladder. And if you do not breathe fully, your body must work overtime to release toxin. So I want each and every one to spend like a minute in order to do some breathing exercise with me. And then after that, I'm gonna share an activity that I do with the children that you can do with your kids too. So start with the breathing. Okay, so we'll take a deep breath. Inhale, exhale. Inhale, exhale. Be still. Inhale, exhale. 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 Perfect. Now, that's just a minute breathing exercises that you can do at the symposium while you're having enjoying yourself with us, and that's something that you can do every day that will have long-lasting effect, because we truly care for each and every one of you, for your support and for including family child care. I'd like to thank everyone that's in here. So shall we start with the activity? I don't know if we can have the music. We do? I think I might have to stand, but I don't know. Then
one little finger, one little finger, one little finger, tap, tap, tap. Point your finger up, point your finger down, put it on your head, head.
head.
One little finger, one little finger, one little finger, tap, tap, tap. Point your finger up, point your finger down, put it on your nose, nose.
Nose.
One little finger, one little finger, one little finger, tap, tap, tap. Point your finger up, point your finger down, put it on your chin, chin. One little finger, one little finger, one little finger, tap, tap, tap. Point your finger up, point your finger down, put it on your arm, arm. One little finger, one little finger, one little finger, tap, tap, tap. Point your finger up, point your finger down, put it on your leg, leg. One little finger, one little finger, one little finger, tap, tap, tap. Point your finger up, point your finger down, put it on your foot, foot. Put it on your leg, leg. Put it on your arm, arm. Put it on your chin, chin. Put it on your nose, nose. Put it on your head, head. Now let's wave goodbye, goodbye.
Goodbye. Thank you, everyone.
Okay, can you guys hear me now?
Yep.
Sorry, thanks. Thank you so much. That was a great exercise for kids, but also for us. I had trouble keeping up, so I guess I better get a little bit more sleep at night and do more studying. But it gets us ready for our next panel. And we've got another exciting group of people coming before us. So if we can pull up the list of panelists, but I'm going to announce them anyway. We're going to start with Leah Bradley, who's the Executive Director of Empowering the Ages. We've got Dr. Ronald Ferguson, founder of The Basics, whom you just heard from and will hear from again. And we've got Kimberly Rusnak, who's the project coordinator for Children's Opportunity Fund, been involved with MMF for quite a while. And we have a special guest who's going to be our facilitator for this discussion, Elijah Wheeler, who's the executive director for Montgomery County Collaboration Council for Children, Youth, and Families. So here they're great pictures, and now you're going to see them live. Elijah, I'm going to turn it over to you.
Thanks, Bill. I appreciate that. And Ruby, thanks for the exercise prior. And I have a feeling that that song is going to be one that's going to be in our mind the rest of the weekend. We won't be able to get it out Great to be here with you all this afternoon. As Bill said, my name is Elijah Wheeler, and I have the pleasure of serving as the Executive Director of the Montgomery County Collaboration Council. I hope that you all are well and looking forward to having a discussion around this important topic. As Bill said, we've got some great panelists here with us this afternoon, one of whom you've heard from already, and Dr. Ron Ferguson. And joined with him is Leah Bradley, along with Kimberly Rusnak. If you would like to pose a question to any of the panelists, please do so in the Q&A function at the bottom of the screen with Zoom, and we'll do our best to get to them. So let's go ahead and get started. And Kimberly, I'll actually begin with you, if that's okay. Ready? Okay. With the knowledge that third grade is when children traditionally go from learning to read to reading to learn, can you explain why concentrating on birth to 5 can alleviate the strain on K to 3 or make up for a lack of quality early care and education?
Sure. So the Children's Opportunity Fund is actually the local partner for the National Campaign for Grade Level Reading, which was initially started by the Annie E. Casey Foundation, as they did a long-term study that found that students who were not proficient in reading by the end of third grade were 4 times more likely to drop out of high school. And in fact, 88% of students who fail to earn a high school diploma are struggling readers when they're in third grade. And third grade, as we've mentioned, really marks that transition from learning to read to reading to learn. And an ability to read by the end of third grade has been tied to higher dropout rates, higher rates of anxiety and depression in children and teens, as well as increased behavioral problems. And so the Children's Opportunity Fund really is building out a strategy that looks at birth to age 8 and understands that we need to build that strong foundation for children and families to really get access to the supports that they need from birth, so that children are really working with their parents as their first teachers on developing these critical skills. As Dr. Ferguson mentioned, so much of brain development and child development happens really early on, that getting access to quality early care and education and supporting families of young children to really understand the roles that they can play being at home with their kids and helping them to develop those different connections and skills in those early years is really, really important.
Thanks, Kimberly. Dr. Ferguson, pivoting to you, can you explain how the basics as community intervention for infants to 5-year-olds is effective in addressing the achievement gap, and then perhaps contextualize basics as a program within COVID-19 pandemic as it stands?
Yeah, the inspiration to do the basics came to me about a decade ago when I noticed in the Early Childhood Longitudinal Survey, which is a nationally representative data set that uses a test called the Bailey test to measure cognitive skills and motor skills and so on of infants and toddlers. The gaps are a little bit there even by the time kids are 9 months old to a year, but by the time they're 2 years old, the gaps are stark. Black boys and Latino boys, for example, are 15 percentage points behind white girls on basic cognitive skills. Native American boys are 20 percentage points behind white girls. Black boys are about 5 to 7 points behind white girls. So all the gaps that we see when they hit kindergarten were already there when they were 2 years old. And it doesn't matter whether you're talking about gender, socioeconomic status as measured by income or parents' education, race, ethnicity. Now, some people jump directly, well, it must be genetic then. It must just be, there was inborn. Well, this research documents systematic differences in caregiving practices that kids experience very early, even the gender differences. When we play with little girls, with toddler girls, it tends to be affection play or literacy skills play. We play with little boys, it tends to be rough and tumble play. Okay, one woman who was actually doing a presentation with me once teared up, and afterward I said, I saw you teared up as a moment. And she said, I just realized, she said, I've got a 4, 3, and 2-year-old. My 2-year-old's a boy, my other kids are girls. And if the girls were sitting on the steps whimpering and acting helpless, I'd pick them up and give them a hug. But I just realized my little 2-year-old boy, I look at him and say, you need to man up. Right? And so we actually deny our little boys affection for fear of undermining their masculinity. We deny infants affection for fear of spoiling them. Okay, and so we can point to a number of different ways that children from different backgrounds, different genders, are actually nurtured differently from the very beginning, that lead these gaps to be in evidence very early. If we can tell people children don't spoil, and your little boy needs a hug too, and infants have already started to encode language, so talking to them builds those neural networks that are going to help them use language later. And the back and forth conversation during book reading helps kids to actually start to think about what you're saying and not just be passive consumers of it, and to have their own point of view. If we can do that, then when children get to kindergarten, they're used to learning with adults. They've already got the neural stuff in their head that's going to help them to get these things done. So the basics is very much starting to build the capacity to do the things we're going to need to do later. And in terms of the way it's integrated with the rest of the community, the basics only works through the rest of the community. Okay, it's through the early childhood providers and the home visitors and the librarians and the health-based organizations that we want to transmit. So basically what we've done is with an expert advisory committee, we boiled down, we distilled the science into these 5 things. And we're handing it over and to collaborate with communities and using this so you don't have to reinvent the wheel to get the message out. And we're connecting you to a national network of other people. This video book I showed you before, the idea to kind of do that came out of Bridgeport, Connecticut. Our best library idea came out of South Carolina. I mean, just the different ideas are coming back from all kinds of different places. And I'll stop with that.
No, that's fine. And Dr. Ferguson, as a follow-up to something that you had stated earlier, considering the importance of limiting stress during early childhood for parents, moms specifically while they're carrying babies, and then once babies enter the world, considering the level of stress that parents are currently under as a result of the pandemic, how is Basics set up to kind of offset some of those stressors that people are currently experiencing?
Well, we're trying to, a lot of the time when people feel stressful, part of what they're feeling stressed about is uncertainty. Just things we don't know, things that are topsy-turvy. So for example, we have in our video for Maximize Love, Manage Stress, it's 4.5 minutes long. We emphasize, for example, having routines. Because you don't have routines, life is topsy-turvy. So trying to have meals at the same time, trying to even have little songs that you sing when the child knows when mommy sings that song, it's bedtime. Or so routines is one of those things. Trying to even just be aware that you can manage your stress, because kind of we just let it happen to us by raising people's attention so they can be more intentional. And then you can give them breathing methods to use. You can help them remember to talk to the people who help them calm down when they aren't feeling so well. You can help them remember to stay out of those situations that they don't have to be in, that they know usually do stress them, right? And just so, and actually one of the things, you just laying with your baby on your chest and taking deep breaths, the skin to skin, just the experience of feeling the love, so to speak, are all things that people can do to reduce the stress. And also just being having other people to talk to. One of the most common things we hear when we talk to frontline service providers who are working with families around the basics is they say parents said, I never had anybody to talk with this about. Okay, they're feeling stressed out, but they're feeling kind of weird that everybody else is not feeling this way. It's just me. There's something wrong with me. Just letting them know there's nothing wrong with you. What you're feeling is a natural human emotion. It's a natural experience, and we want to work together so all of us can help all of us to manage that more effectively. And once we start reaching out, I mean, there are experts probably all over Montgomery County. There are experts in stress management. Okay, get some of those experts connected up with this conversation. Okay, then we just have to be careful not to overwhelm people with ideas about how to manage stress, right? We just have to manage that.
Great, thank you. I appreciate that. Leah, question for you. How can community members of all ages take their lifelong learning and development and use that to help support birth to 5 and into elementary school?
Thank you. That's a great question. I think it's important that as we look at our community as a way to support all of our youth, we're focused on the strengths and assets of the residents of all ages and how can everyone support the youth and also are maximizing their own potential. I mean, we know, and as Ron has shared with us, from birth, children need the love and support of their family, but they also need their community to help them thrive. And so I think that if we are effectively utilizing the human capital that we have in Montgomery County, knowing that everyone learns and grows as they go through life, and many want to give back to their community, there's so much that can be done. You know, there's an opportunity for community members of all ages to support the kids, but also the caregivers, whether it's in childcare centers, informal or formal in-home caregiving, as well as schools. It can be role modeling, teaching, or as Ron just shared, just being a listening ear, knowing there's someone out there that isn't going to judge and is going to be there to support and help. So I think that there is so much that individuals of all ages can bring to the lives of the kids at a very young age and continue to support them. There's also a role in helping to support those who want to be childcare providers, whether they're in classes for that or they're taking their licensure exam. But I do believe that it does take a community. And if we look at individuals of all ages and see what they have to offer, then we can really support our youth in the community as well as their families.
Great. Thank you, Leah. Appreciate that. I think one of the things that we've learned here today, folks, is that we all play a part in children and their families. So knowing that, we invite you to check out the landing page at Nonprofit MoCo MMF, the symposium for day one, so that you can get in touch with Leah, Kimberly, or Dr. Ferguson if you have any further questions or if you have any comments that you'd like to share. But we appreciate you all joining us this afternoon and look forward to a more enriching conversation as we move forward.
Thank you so much. That was very enlightening. We appreciate the time and energy of Elijah, Lee, Ron in that panel. And clearly, my takeaway from that is the old adage, it takes a village to raise a child. So thank you again for everyone on that panel and your energy, and all of our participants who are thinking through what they heard to say and put things in the chat. It's my honor now to take the time to introduce to you Dusty Rude. Dusty's the president and CEO of Rogers Consulting. And he's going to close out today's symposium for us. So Dusty, thank you for being with us today, and I hand it off to you.
Great. Well, thanks so much. I want to first start off by thanking Susan and Bill for your masterful mastering of ceremonies today and taking us through today's agenda. You were wonderful. I also want to take a moment and thank our amazing sponsors. We can't thank them enough. As Bill Tompkins said, actions often speak louder than words, and actions costs and takes money. So thanks to all of them. I also want to thank the panelists and the presenters today. I want to thank you for not just your leadership on this issue, but really your inspiration on this issue. 10 feet away from me right now, as I sit in my home, I've got a 2-year-old and a 4-year-old and a 7-year-old just outside the door playing right now at the moment. So I really appreciate the words, and it all resonated with me. And last but not least, we need to thank our wonderful MMF staff and the amazing folks who pulled today off. Farah, Meredith, Karen, Mindy, Leslie, and certainly our fearless leader, Sharon Friedman, who, if I can take a moment to digress, won't be able to be with us at next week's session due to a little minor surgery she's going to be having. I know she's fine. I know she wants to be with us, but let's all send our love and good vibes to Sharon as she undertakes that. You know, clearly COVID has has 10x the importance of childcare, early childcare and education. And in this rapidly shifting world that we're in, where disparity gaps are widening at an ever increasing pace, developing solutions and meaningfully supporting early care and education, meaningfully supporting our current and future workforce has never been more important. So as you depart today, what can you do? As Dr. Ferguson mentioned, many of you, this is your life's work, and I'm in awe of you for what you do. But for those who are also looking for ways to contribute and find ways to be a part of this, the Symposium landing page is available to you, where you can find many of the resources today. And that landing page will be updated after each of these Symposium events over the coming weeks. I also encourage and invite all of you to join us next week for our second of the third days, where the symposium will be focused. The title of it and the theme of it is "There's No I in ECE, and What Role Do Partnerships Play?" It'll be another really dynamic, fascinating discussion, and I encourage all of you to attend and join in that. And then finally, unfortunately, we all can't be together at this time, but one of the best things about forums and symposiums in a pre-COVID world that hopefully we'll be able to get back and today we'll seek to emulate is just the opportunity to bump into fellow friends and professionals and spend time chatting in the lobby and in the hallway around these issues. So in your chat box at the moment, I think you'll see now that a link has been added to our lobby. And so this will be a great place for all of you and any of you who wish to engage in a more casual conversation with attendees. And I believe even many of the presenters will also be there as well. It'll be an opportunity for you guys to mix and mingle. So with that, again, I want to thank everyone for your commitment to this most important issue. The work that everyone is doing is only made more impactful in that we're all doing it together. So with that, thanks everyone for being here, and we look forward to seeing all of you and more next week. Thanks, everyone.